A very good morning, everybody. Today we have a session on the presentations by semester 4 students, and they are going to make presentations on comparative literature and translation studies. In this first morning session, we have divided this in two parts. In the morning, we will have comparative literature, and then it will be followed by the presentations on translation studies. In the morning one, we have the students making the presentations. We have divided them in groups. So group one will be Akash, Akshay, and Asha. Group two, Bhumiba, Darshan, and Dhatri. Group three is Divya, Hardi, and Hemali. Fourth group is Hiral, Jatin, and Jai Solanki. And the fifth group for this session is Jai Maruniya, Jai Sri, and Kavita. They are going to make presentations on these articles on comparative literature studies. The articles are Why Comparative Indian Literature, written by Sisir Kumar Das, followed by Comparative Literature in India by Amiya Dev. It will be followed by Comparative Literature in India, an overview of its history by Subha Chakraborty Dasgupta. The another two articles will be on why is comparative literature, what is comparative literature today by Susan Bassnett. And the final one will be by Todd Presner on comparative literature in the age of digital humanities on possible futures for a discipline. So let us invite the first group to start with the presentation.
Hello everyone, very good morning to all of you. So today me and my co-presenter AKASH CHAVDA, we are going to make presentation on the first article of comparative literature, which is titled as Why Comparative Indian Literature. So first of all, comparative literary study, we all aware about that it is a academic field that involves the study of different literary texts, and it examines the interrelationships between different literary texts from different culture and genres. So comparative literature divided in four major schools. They are like German school, French, American, and British. The first one is German school that examines Johannes Gottfried von Herders in 1778 through folk songs from diverse ethnic groups. The German school focused on thematology. The second one is French school. It initially emphasized influence studies, later involves into reception studies, focusing on how works are interpreted. The third one is American school. It expanded comparative literatures into an interdisciplinary field, linking it cultural context, and it emphasized process over product. The fourth last school is British school, and Matthew Arnold introduced the touchstone method for the comparative criticism. S.S. Proposed the ideas of placing in literature. This is the major idea of this last school. And if we see in Indian context, then Indian literature unified through the struggle of freedom and its quest of national identity. There are some key contributions from Indian literature. So now let's discuss the article. First of all, abstract. So Sisir Kumar Das examines comparative Indian literature as a distinct academic field, challenging Western-centric approaches while advocating for its validity. Das argues that India's multilingual literary tradition and historical cross-cultural interactions necessitate a comparative approach to studying its literature. He proposes a framework that transcends traditional nationalist and linguistic boundaries, emphasizing both interlinguistic and interlinguistic literary relationships within Indian literature, while arguing against narrow categorizations based solely on language or nationality. So now, in the earlier part of this article, there are major key arguments that given by Sisir Kumar Das. The first, Indian literature needs an unifying framework to overcome fragmentation caused by the linguistic division, and comparative Indian literature aims to explore connections between different Indian literatures. It balancing unity and diversity is crucial for a successful approach. Then inspiration from Welsh literature focuses on enduring works that transcend time and language. In Welsh literature, concept of Goethe's Welsh literature is also talking about that meaning of as a world literature. Developing an independent framework is essential to avoid Western biases, and broader scope for comparative studies should extend beyond linguistic and national boundaries. Then he addressing the historical neglect of Eastern literature and Western scholarship in crucial. Then thus also defining comparative within an Indian context is necessary. So while giving this argument, the major core idea of the early part of article are like Indian literature, despite its diverse language and cultural reflect a profound underlying unity. This is the major idea of the early part of that article, and for highlighting this part, he uses the word like multilingual literature. However, existing frameworks fail to capture the interconnectedness of these rich traditions. Then comparative Indian literature offers a powerful method to explore the connection and influences between different Indian literature. Then thus also highlight that drawing inspiration from the concept of Welsh literature, we must focus on enduring work that transcend time and language rather than simply collecting all existing texts. Then he also examined that it is an imperative to develop a framework for comparative Indian literature that is distinct from Western approaches, addressing the historical neglect of Eastern literature and Western scholarship. And in the last, he examined that our goal is not merely to compare, but to foster a holistic appreciations of Indian literary achievements and transcending the limitations and linguistic and religion boundaries. So by analyzing this article, my learning outcomes are like this. That understanding it involves understanding India's literary diversity, learns about interconnectedness themes across regions, break boundaries between religion and national literature, and promote cultural unity through literature, and gain a broader perspective on historical and social changes. Now, for the for the remaining part, I would like to request Akash Chavda.
Thank you, Akshay. Now, let us carry on this presentation with another set of key arguments by S.K. Das. First of all, S.K. Das says that comparative literature in West is primarily emerged as a comparative Western literature, and this study involves, by and large, the European literatures. And S.K. Das further critiques the European idea of Eurocentrism in comparative literature. And in this comparative Western literature, they also exclude the Oriental literature or the Eastern literature in general. Furthermore, he also says that this exclusion of the Oriental literature is not always driven by the what we can say is biases and prejudices, but sometimes it is also driven by pragmatism also. And the academic justification for this exclusion of the Oriental literature is given in this line, that historical parallels based solely on speculations. And this exclusion of the Oriental literature, it is because a Westerner believes that the Oriental literature does not have the sufficient groundings, whether historical or cultural, and they are also based on the speculation. And further, if we take civilization as a criterion, which means a basis to do the comparative studies, then we can say that it is also problematic, because Western people thinks that they are the only one who are civilized. The European countries, those white peoples, are only the civilized people, and in that they remain ignorant of the Oriental literature. That is the thing. And if we talk about the comparative Western literature, then we can say that it is a study of two texts that belongs to the same same nation. And one can argue that if we see the comparative Indian literature, then one may argue that it is a one national literature written in many languages. And also, S.K. Das says that comparative Indian literature is as valid as comparative Western literature, and we do not have to worry about that also. And India's multilingual reality makes its comparative literature a unique and a valid domain, similar as comparative Western literature. So let us see the core idea behind his arguments. S.K. Das advocates for a redefinition of comparative literature to address the limitation of Eurocentric and monolingual frameworks. The limitations of the Eurocentric and monolingual frameworks. The limitation here is that the limitation is here is like just a minute. It is because of the same language, and he gives the example of American and British literature, because both the nations follows the similar kind of language, that is English, but yet comparatists do not study these kind of two language, and they do not consider it as a comparative study also. And he also says that neither language nor political boundaries nor culture can solely define the idea of national literature. And considering keeping these things in the mind, he also gives the two concepts: intralinguistics and interlinguistic studies. Intralinguistics is kind of a study of similar languages, that is of American and British nation. And interlinguistics can be done in the country like India, where there is various languages and university diversity of the languages. Like we can do the comparative study between Hindi and Bangla, or Gujarati or Marathi or Tamil or Kannada. So in that way, though he says that language is not seemingly dependable, because it is not a foolproof, as it can serve as a medium of multiple literatures. For example, British and American. And this kind of criterion of language can also lead to the homogeneity of language also. But at the same time, Sisir Kumar Das says that this kind of homogeneity is good rather than having the civilization's homogeneity. And in this way, India challenges the traditional framework of the Western model of national literature. S.K. Das also warns us against the potential parochialism in literary studies, whether it emerged from the East or West. He also gives the terminology of comparative Indian literature, and he does this not out of the anxiousness that there is something like comparative Western literature also. And Indian literature produced in various Indian languages provides a strong terra firma or strong foundation for comparative studies, because, as I have said, that India has various languages, and they all form kind of a strong framework for doing the comparative studies. And subsequently, he also raises a question that will not the study of Indian literature alone breed a kind of literary patriotism or critical parochialism which must be avoided? Well, he says that this would lead to the parochialism, because we are here moving from comparative studies to the comparative Indian studies. Comparative study is a kind of a study of world literature, and on the other side, if we see the comparative Indian literature is a study of Indian nation, so wouldn't it lead to the parochialism? And in the answer he gives that he argues that this can be avoided. This parochialism can be avoided by embracing the diversity of Indian languages and interconnectedness of the Indian literature and the relationship with the other literary traditions also. And from the history, we can see that Indian literature has influenced and has been influenced by the many other languages and many other literary traditions also. India has given birth to the languages like Urdu, and in the history also, the Sanskrit plays have been translated and being read by the various other literary disciplines also. And there is also kind of a still gap remains in doing the comparative studies. Like comparative study has not been very much explored in the context of India and China, or India and Greece also. So in that way, India is not merely Indian, because Indian literature has influenced many other literary traditions, and it is also been influenced by many other also. And at the later part, at the end of the article, Sisir Kumar Das also mentions Amiya Dev, who says in his article towards the comparative Indian literature that comparison is the right reason for us because one, we are multilingual, and two, we are the third world. While keeping in mind our colonial history, we have to also look, while doing the comparative studies, we also have to look that where are we, where are our location, and we also have to keep in mind our socio-political implications also. And in that, keeping these things in the mind, we have to do the re-evaluation and the modification of the Western concept like influence. And influence in this way, in colonial context, kind of a derogatory words can be. So we have to redefine that also. And towards the conclusion, we can say that the solution lies in the Indian scholars critically examining their own literary traditions and shedding our all colonial prejudices and psychological restriction, and engaging with the world literature without any kind of biases. And we have to look and critically examine our own Indian literature, and that is from within that. And journey is not from comparative literature to comparative Indian literature, but from comparative Indian literature to comparative literature. So my learning outcome would be the first of all, that I need to revisit my old comparative literature, comparative study presentation, because I have till now given 2 presentations on comparative studies, and I had the very narrow notion of comparative studies, because in those presentations, what I have done is just to highlight various similarities and dissimilarities of the 2 particular texts. But after learning this article and comparative literature in general, I get to know about that, no, comparative literature is not something that it requires a deeper study, not just the similarities and dissimilarities. So that is one thing. And another thing about the relationship between the language, nationality, and literary traditions, that how these things go hand in hand, and how these things are also complicated in their own manner. And also the relationship between the Western and Indian literary tradition, whether it is historically or it is till now also. So these are the references, and I also want to acknowledge that Akshay and I have used ChatGPT to simplify this article's language, and also to gain deeper understanding of this article also. And thank you. Now we can ask any questions.
first, my question in your presentation, you have mentioned two terms, influence and reception. What is the key difference between the two terms in the context of Indian comparative schools?
Yes, these two terms, influence and reception, comes from the French school of comparative study, and in the context of India, where I have mentioned about the Amiya Dev's article, in which he says that we have to reevaluate this both the terms, because French school has used these terms in their context, and we have to see and locate these terms and reevaluate this term in our colonial context. So in our colonial context, we have to see that influence is sometimes used as a pejorative terms, because in my understanding, I can say that the influence is kind of an influence of our masters, and we can at one point consider good, because reception, many of the Indian writers have gained their inspiration from the Western writings also. So in that way, but in any case, we have to reevaluate this framework in the context of India.
Okay. Is there anybody else? Second question. Yeah. Okay. Unnati is there.
So how does comparative Indian literature, according to you, contribute to understanding Indian history?
Yes, as I have mentioned in the presentation also, that Indian history of just a minute. Yes, here he also says that these kind of things to focus on the Indian comparative Indian studies would not lead to the parochialism or patriotism. Well, this answer we can see in the history of India, and as I have mentioned that Indian history, Indian literary tradition has been influenced by many other literary traditions also. So in that way, our history is also rich and diverse. So in that way, we can say that it can be used good. So sorry, I am not able to give proper answer, but I will see that. Okay, thank you.
Very good morning, everyone. I am DARSHAN and with my co-presenters, BHUMIBA, GOHIL and DHATRI PARMAR, we are presenting a presentation on comparative literature in India, an article by Amiya Dev. So let's get started. So Amiya Dev's article, Comparative Literature in India, dwells into the complexities of defining Indian literature amidst its linguistic diversity. It proposes an interliterary process framework that highlights translations and cultural exchanges as essential to understanding Indian literature in dynamics and interconnected way. In the article, Dev has focuses on a critical question that how can Indian literature with their linguistic and cultural diversity be studied collectively without erasing their individual identity. The objectives of this study is to analyze the relationship between unity and diversity in Indian literatures and to explore the role of comparative literature in fostering interliterary understanding. To address this, he used the methodology of analysis of India's linguistic and literary traditions through historical, cultural, and post-structuralist lens, and he engagement with the concept like interliterariness and differential multilogues. By study of this article, the key finding that reveals is that Indian literature is not static entity. It is evolving process shaped by translation and interactions and exchanges. And by recognizing linguistic plurality, it enhances the study of sharp and cultural narratives. Key points are that India's linguistic diversity challenged the idea of singular Indian literature. In the article, he says that it is not Indian literature, it is literatures, because there are many dialects and languages are there, and India does not hold only a single literature, it has literatures. There is a debate between unity and diversity. In the article, we get to see the criticism of Indian post-structuralism for being too theoretical and it is detached from practice. They have proposed to view Indian literature as an interconnected literary process. The article criticized of creating English archive of Indian literature through translation, as he says that by translating Indian literature to English, it loses its originality. Key arguments, Dev's arguments are that Indian literature is not single homogeneous entity, but it comprises diverse Indian literatures, and viewing Indian literature as entirely separate is problematic. There are significant connections and interconnections among them. Diversity and distinctiveness should coexist with the recognition of shared Indian commonality. He advocates for an interliterary approach that highlights interactions, overlaps, and the thematic connections across Indian literature. Process of exchange, evolution, and it is not static and fixed concept. Dev has used many references of various scholars. I have here presented a few of them. In first is Gurbhagat Singh. Gurbhagat Singh is criticizing Western approaches, and it says that it is inadequate for Indian diversity. Second is JADAV. He criticized Indian fiction's trend of existentialist aestheticism, and he emphasized the importance of fluidity and multiplicity in Indian literature, resisting narrative of fixed unity. Last is Azaz Ahmad. He highlights the limitation in defining Indian literature compared to the richness of individual literature in 22 languages, that is officially India's 22 languages in the constitution. And he opposes the nation-state driven identity construction in literature. Through the study of this article, I get to have many deep understanding. And the learning outcomes are following that I have now deeper understanding of how diverse and complex Indian literature are and why they can't be seen as one unified entity. I learned to appreciate the balance between recognizing the distinctiveness of each literature and identifying common thread that connect them. The idea of interliterary process helped me see Indian literature as a dynamic and evolving interaction between language and cultures. I realized the importance of avoiding generalization which can overshadow the richness of individual literature. And the last is the key perspectives that I have briefly presented of Guru Bhagat Singh, Jaidev and Aizaz Ahmad taught me to approach Indian literature with the respect of diversity and context. So that is from my side. Now I would like to invite my fellow presenter Bhumi to continue the presentation.
Thank you so much, Darshan, for providing that overview. Now let us dive into the very first concept given by Amiya Dev, which is the problem of unity in diversity. Now, as we all know, India has this unparalleled linguistic diversity. There are officially 22 recognized languages. Unofficially, there are more than 221 other languages, and there are many different regional dialects. Now, because of this linguistic diversity, Amiya Dev presents the question, is Indian literature in the singular a valid category, or are we rather to speak of Indian literatures in plural? Now, this problem of unity in diversity brings that there is hegemonic apprehensions. We see that the dominant languages often overshadow the other regional languages, and here Amiya Dev also suggests the problem in Sahitya Academy's motto, which is Indian literature is one, though written in many languages. And as Amiya Dev says, that there is hegemonic apprehensions that many other dominant languages, for example, Sanskrit or Hindi, they might overshadow other languages and they might encroach upon the individualities of diverse literatures. And because of this, Amiya Dev gives a retort to Sahitya Academy's motto, which is Indian literature is one because it is written in many languages. Now, based on this, Guru Bhagat Singh gives the differential multilog. This concept is an alternative to dialogue. Dialogue, as you know, is a conventional two-way communication method. Multilog suggests engagement among multiple perspectives and voices. This concept given by Guru Bhagat Singh helps us understanding Indian diversity without sacrificing the individuality of particulars. Here we see Guru Bhagat Singh gives a rejection of French and American school. He suggests that Indian literature requires its own theories, and that is why he sees comparative literature as an exercise in differential multilog. Now, this concept given by Guru Bhagat Singh is based on post-structuralist suspicion. This means that when there is the idea of unifying the languages or making or doing this, like capturing all the literatures under the term of Indian literature, there is this problem of that it is controlled by the center or the powerful people, and because of this, there can be the problem of accumulation of power, and because of this, the answer to this problem is to decentralize the power. And here we see Guru Bhagat Singh gives difference as an inclusion rather than an exclusionary force. We see that this concept aligns with post-structuralism. And Indian literature, Guru Bhagat Singh says that Indian literature should have mutual engagement without the need of hierarchical categorization. Again, Amiya Dev criticizes this post-structuralism of India because it tends to emphasize theoretical constructs at the expense of practical application. We see that it is heavily based on theory, and these practical applications of these theory are not present. Scholars often attempt to force literature into pre-existing theoretical frameworks. They don't make a framework based on literature, rather they borrow the frameworks from other places and try to force Indian literature into this. And this leads to an abundance of meta theory, which is, meta theory is basically theorizing about the theory itself. Because of this, there is not a deeper engagement of work and text, and there is not this deeper understanding, but rather a shallow work of research. And here Amiya Dev raises the question of situs and theory. Now, what is situs? Situs is a location where the theory is originating, or the location of the theory scholar. Now, Amiya Dev says that this situs is as important as theorization. He goes on to say that a wrong theory is bad, but a theory from a wrong situs is equally bad. And after explaining this, Amiya Dev goes on to the scholar Jaidev's concept. Jaidev, while criticizing existentialist aestheticism in comparative Indian historical experiences. Jaydev goes on to say that the pre-modern foundation of these commonalities he first discusses, which is oral and performing traditions and ease of intertranslatability. During pre-modern India, there used to be this ease of intertranslatability. The translating of works was quite easy, and at the same time, these stories originated from oral or performing traditions. So this is like a shared historical experience of Indian literatures, and we see it from the example of Bhakti movement. So that movement inspired many works in different languages. And here Amiya Dev suggests that Jayadev's this concept is only working in pre-modern time, because if this is implied in today's time, then there are dangers of nation state, creating a nation state. The concept of nation state is more elaborated by Ejaz Ahmed in his work in Theory, Classes, Nation and Literatures. Ejaz Ahmed says that a syndicated Indian literature is often an unsatisfactory categorization. It is not a proper categorization, and there is something remains. And he rejects the analogy between Indian literature and European literature. Many times people compare that Indian literature, the title Indian literature is like that of title European literature. But European literature emerges as an umbrella term, and Indian literature becomes this very narrow categorization. And because of this, as we saw, there are minor languages are often ignored or not counted. So this happens in syndicated Indian literature. And Ahmed also goes on to say that Indian archives, which is that Indian literature has archives of 22 major recognized languages. So there is this difference in archive, and he suggests that we should make one archive. But here also the problem arises that to make this one archive, one way is that we translate all this work in English language. Now this is non-hegemonious because it removes the different archives. But at the same time, it is hegemonizing by latent colonial attitude, because use of English is heavily relied upon. And this concept of English archive of Indian literature was suggested a few years back by V.K. Gokak and Sujit Mukherjee. And they say that Indian literature there should be development of an Indo-English corpus of literature that was created out of English translations of major texts from major Indian languages. Here also we see that Ahmed criticizes this idea as well, and he is not as opposed to English language as we can say, for example, Kukiba Thiongo, who suggests that there should be a removal of English department. Ahmed does not take that radical stance, but at the same time, there is this problem that if the translations are done in English, then it is okay, but let's say that the translations are done in Hindi. Then again, there is this problem of hegemonizing, that Hindi would emerge as a dominant language, and one way or the other languages will be crushed under it. At the end of this, Amiya Dev says that Indian literature is not an entity, but an interliterary condition, which means that it is like all these cultures, all these different literatures are influencing each other, and there is this interliterary condition among them. More on that from here on, my co-presenter Dhatri will continue, but before that I would like to share my learning outcome of this article, which is that it helped in understanding the significance of interliterary interactions, including translations and cross-linguistic influences in shaping Indian literature as an ongoing process. It also helped in evaluating the role of post-structuralism and nationalism in Indian literary discourses and their implication of constructing Indian literature. And it helped in appreciating the historical depth and cultural specificity of Indian literary practices. From here, Dhatri will continue.
Thank you, Bhumi and Darshan, for combining all the arguments. Now, to move on, Amiya Dev presented various arguments from the scholars. And next in line, the scholar is Swapan Majumdar. Swapan Majumdar, in his book Comparative Literature, an Indian Dimension, talks about how the Indian literature is neither a simple unity or nor a pure diversity. He said it, but rather, I quote, a systematic whole where many subsystems interact towards one in continuous and never-ending dialectic, unquote. So, by this argument, Amiya Dev takes a middle ground that with the help of his argument, he said that Indian comparative literature is unified, but it has a diversity, and we have to take a middle ground while we have to acknowledge the diversity and we have to find the unity as well. Next in line, Amiya Dev used the argument of Sisir Kumar Das, and he also highlighted his contribution. Sisir Kumar Das created a comprehensive chronological history of Indian literature. Basically, he is making a framework with which we can understand the importance of Indian comparative literatures. So he used three key arguments. So he made a team-based data collection covering all 22 recognized literatures, all the languages from there. So basically, Sisir Kumar Das is making a group of people, and they are interacting with each other to create and finding a unity within the diverse Indian languages. They documented various literary events, publications, reviews, and translation. Now, this framework helped to find, and they also use the social events of literary events, like, for example, using fiction books, that how a partition is captured in various languages. Now, that helps to understanding how Indian comparative literatures is sharing a common threads, and how there is a diverse social event or themes are exploring in that. So, this help in finding, as Amiya Dev argues, that patterns of profense and metafense across different literatures. So this very framework helped Amiya Dev to understand the commonalities of 19th century literature while avoiding forced unification. So time and again we try to share unification, that Indian languages have a unification, it has one. So Amiya Dev counter-argued this very argument of having a unification. For supporting this, Amiya Dev says, I quote, Das's work on literature of the 19th century in India does not designate this Indian literature a category by itself. Rather, the work suggests a rationale for the proposed research, the objective being to establish whether a pattern can be found through the ages, unquote. So they've tried to find a pattern, a similar kind of a pattern, and within the various languages of the Indian. Next in line is K.M. George's work. In the article, normally we are finding positive as well as negatives, and like what are the opposing ideas within the field. So similar way, Amiya Dev used the argument of K.M. George, that what we should not do. Now, K.M. George earlier, before the Sisir Kumar Das, did the framework of the comparing the Indian literatures. So what he did is he covered the only 15 languages of literature instead of recognized all Indian languages. That is something like narrow downing the very idea of Indian literatures. And with this, there is an restrictive generic bias coming, because we are using only 15 languages of India, avoiding all other minor languages. So that showed a Western hegemonic categorization given by the Western approaches. So to counter argue, Amiya Dev used the work of K.M. George, and he says, I quote, poetry, for instance, was discussed in terms of traditional and modern, but as if traditional was exclusively Indian and modern the result of Western impact, unquote. So Amiya Dev criticized to take an approach traditional versus modernity, where every traditional thing is going to be an Indian and every modern thing will be going to be an imitation of the Western. And now that is what the another translation studies scholar E.V. Ramakrishnan argues, that Indian comparative Indian literature has its own modernity, its own kind of a socio-political condition which helped to develop Indian literatures. So it also lacks a true comparative analysis. I quote, comparison was only suggested, that is, the reader was required to make whatever comparison was necessary or appropriate, unquote. So now this is taking as an imitation of the Western methodology of doing a comparative analysis. So that's why Amiya Dev provides counter argument that what we should not do while we are doing a comparative Indian comparative literature studies. Next in line, he provides an argument by Umashankar Joshi and Anant Murthy, and he said that as a president of an Indian National Comparative Literature Association, he represented the unity approach, and he provided also institutional framework to study the Indian literature. So, to tie everything up together and key findings of the article, this article proposes that Indian literature should be understood as an interliterary condition rather than fixed entity. This article also emphasized the importance of a citus as being in colonial identity and having in different languages. The citus is important in doing a theatrical study of this comparative literature. Comparative literature provides frameworks to understanding unity, diversity, dialectic. We appreciate the various dialects of the India, at the same time finding the commonalities, and inter-Indian reception and translation, that how various languages, for example, are Hindi, Gujarati, have other influence of the Persian languages or Farsi languages within this. Indian literature as an ever in making. It is not a static point, but still it is an ongoing process. As Michel Foucault argues in Dialogism, that there is an ongoing dialogue happening within the comparative literature. And it also emphasized need to develop a comparative approach specific to Indian context. In this article, some of the limitation was noted by Amiya Dev, and these limitation are a challenge of dealing with multiple languages and translation, which is kind of a challenge for a scholar in the comparative literature. We need many people to come up together and having a dialogue and making a kind of a theory. There is, of course, as Bhumi mentioned, that risk of hegemonic approach through English or Hindi translation with doing archives. And there is also difficulty in balancing the university and diversity without comparing either. So talking about my personal learning outcome, then I personally have a narrow idea of the comparative literature. And the very idea of world literature was very much absent while we are making presentation of all these last 3 semesters. So this helped me to understand what the world literature is, and also the applying this comparative approaches. Like I understand that what the comparative Indian literature is. So there is also a different kind of genre altogether in comparative literature. I also learned how the role of translation is necessary in doing the comparative analysis, because a text written in various languages, whether it is a Mexican, Russian, but the translation is the only means of way through which we can explore the other world literature. So that also helped me by reading this article. I also learned to identify commonalities without forcing uniformity. We have basically the idea of having the unity, but at the same time appreciating diversity. That's what I also learned. I also identify the shared historical influence by acknowledging regional unities, and at the end and most important, I recognize the importance of citus in literary analysis in a practical life as well. These are our references, and thank you. Now, if you have any question, feel free to ask.
Yes, Tanya, my question is, how does Amiya Dev's argument for identifying common threads across Indian literature enhance the scope of comparative Indian literary studies?
Okay. Amiya Dev argues that there is a common thread, and this we can find from these religious literature, or we can say mythical literature. Now, Ramayana and Mahabharata is spreading across the India, and different languages have a different kind of their stories. So if we are even taking an example of Ramayana, then various languages have their own Ramayana, but this very shared thread between this is Ramayana. So with the help of that, we can find that how Malayali language is portraying the characters of Ramayana, how Gujarati writers such as Draupadi or Gunvansha writing about Ramayana and Draupadi, how they are portraying characters and themes. Similar way, how the South Indian part or North Indian part using the same kind of an we can say archetype of religious or mythical stories to write down. So this can help to find also doing comparative studies, that how one language is showing culture and what kind of what is there and what is missing in different Indian within the Indian languages of the India.
My question is for you, Bhumi. To what extent does Dev's idea of Indian literature ever in the remaking reflect a dynamic form of unity?
Okay, so the question is that to what extent does Dev's idea of Indian literature ever in the remaking reflect the dynamic form of unity? And my answer would be that as we saw that it is an evolving entity, it is not fixed, and because of this, because it is not fixed and it is always evolving, this means that there is always influence on each other. All the literatures influence each other through their literary forms, their genres, their thematic concerns, and their you can say the subject matter. So because of this influence, we see that there is this dynamic form of unity, that they are interconnected and they are one, but at the same time we cannot generalize them under this one category. So we see that it is because it is ever in the remaking, it keeps on influencing each other, and there is this form of unity. So I hope that answers your question.
You can unmute for a while. Huh? You can please unmute in the speaker. Are you able to listen? You can unmute for a while. Okay. You can unmute for a while. So far, things are going on quite well. And just so far, things are going on quite well. Only in Akshay's case, I was not able to see a personalized learning outcome. All the remaining 5 of you have very well presented your learning outcome, specifically talking in your personal way. So that is what you have to continue. In case the other presenters have made a general observations and not personalized learning outcome, when you speak, you can try to connect with your personal experience here. And it's a good idea. This is what you have to continue in your regular presentations of literatures also, contemporary literatures also. And similarly, you are supposed to write on your digital portfolios regarding how literature shaped me also. And both the presentations were also quite good and also exemplified very well the content of the article. Key aspects of both the articles were analyzed in both the presentations. Okay, let us have the next one now.
Hello everyone. We make presentation on Subha Chakraborty Dasgupta article on comparative literature in India and overview of its history. These are the presenter, me, HARDI, and HEMALI. These are the points which we cover up. Now the Dasgupta's article cover up the abstract that the article evolution of comparative literature in India, especially focus and beginning at the Jadavpur University at the Kolkata in West Bengal, under the influence of Tagore's vision of world literature or Vishwa Sahitya. Well, initially the influence by the British literary study, and the department gradually decolonized and focus on the decolonized process after the process of the decolonized. It emphasizing in Indian literature and Southern literature. Shift in the approach are evident, moving from the influence studies to cross-cultural relation and reception studies. The field has expanded in encompass recently in the voice of marginalized and non-hierarchical relationship and of the literary and cultural relationship. Now the research problem arises that while we reflect of the idea of the comparative literature in India, especially on the history of comparative literature, where it begins and influences, the research problem arises that how has the evolution of comparative literature in India, especially in India, addressed the dual challenges of decolonization and the need for interdisciplinary fields or approaches which focus in inclusivity across of the voice of marginalized and mainstream of in the literature within the global and local literary networks. The objective which focus on the history and growth of comparative literature in India, highlight its focus on Indian literary tradition and voice of marginalized, promote the non-hierarchical and cross-cultural literary connection. Now the key findings in the article that comparative literature, especially in India, as according to Subha Chakraborty, emerged as the response to colonial influence, aiming to establish indigenous and creative pedagogical practice. Now the methodology, which reflect that the interdisciplinary field and approach of interdisciplinary, which combining the literature, history, social and cultural sciences, the case studies on syllabi, workshop and voice of marginalized, which focus especially this focus on the voice of marginalized, and the reception studies and adaptation and transformation of text. Now about the author Subha Chakraborty Dasgupta. She was a well-known professor of the comparative literature at the Jadavpur University in the Kolkata, West Bengal, and also she was visiting professor at University of Delhi, and she was teaching as a coordinated research on project edited in the Jadavpur Journal of the comparative literature, and also taught as in the Tokyo University of Foreign Study or Literature. And she was especially known for comparative literature and translation, multilingualism in world literature, and affiliation with the part of International Comparative Literature and Association Research Team. Now the main idea or key concept point which discussed in the article, that the emergence or development of this comparative literature according to Subha Chakraborty, which was emerged in 1956 at Jadavpur University, influenced by the Rabindranath Tagore concept of Vishwa Sahitya or world literature. Now, and another one is the focus on decolonization, shifted from the Eurocentric frameworks to indigenous approaches, and the field of various kind of field and methods of interdisciplinary fields, which reflect the translation and cultural study, and also reflect the idea of reception study, and the inclusivity, which emphasize on the voice of marginalized, and also reflect the oral tradition and regional literature. And the connection, which local to global connection, promotes the cross culture and non-hierarchical literary relationship. And these are the learning outcomes which I find that understand the historical development of comparative literature in India, especially focus by the Chakraborty Dasgupta, analyze the interdisciplinary fields like translation, reception studies or cultural studies, explore the regional, marginalized and oral traditional, and appreciate the cross-culture and global literary studies, critically evaluate the pedagogical approach in comparative literature. Now I would like to invite my co-leader Hardi.
am discussing the key arguments of Subha Chakraborty's article. The current goal involves mapping intercultural relations which seeking non-hierarchical connection and understanding literature's role in diverse cultures in the whole world. In the essence, the field has dynamically evolved, which emphasizing contextual engagement with both Indian and non-Western cultures. Chakraborty Das. Subha Chakraborty Dasgupta has divided this article in 7 parts. These are the 7 parts. Let's begin with the first one, the beginnings. The early comparative focus. The aspect of literature in India existed before the formal establishment of comparative literature as a discipline which emphasizing inter-Indian and cross-cultural literary studies. Translation activities in Bengal towards the end of the 19th century, Bengal witnessed large-scale translation activities and discussions about global literary connection, which exemplified by Satyendranath Dutt's vision of fostering the relationships of joy, which published in 1904. Another thing is Rabindranath Tagore's contribution during his time in his 1907 stocks Vishwa Sahitya means world literature, which laid a conceptual foundation for comparative literature, which focuses on human relationships and communal creation of global literature. Its establishment of Jadavpur University's department, which the comparative literature at Jadavpur University was established in 1956, which rooted in the ideals of indigenous education as envisioned by the National Council of Education. Buddhadeva Bose's perspective for the comparative literature, which emphasized moving away from colonial British literature towards exploring French and Indian classical text, which marking the beginnings of the decolonizing approaches. The significant faculty eminent modern poets and translators like Surendranath Datta were instrumental in shaping the creative and intellectual environment of the department. Creative legacy, early students and faculty of the department become influential poets and critics, which fostering the environment of literary creativity. Colonial influence in pedagogy, despite decolonizing impulses, the curriculum retained colonial frameworks, which emphasizing European literary periods alongside Indian and Sanskrit literature. Comparative epistemology, early comparative studies, which focused on aesthetic systems, linking social structures with aesthetics and fostering dialogues between texts like Iliad and the Ramayana. Challenging curriculums in the 1956 syllabus included Greek, Latin, Sanskrit, and Bengali and European literature, emphasizing cross-culture and historical comparisons. Focus on ancient text, Greek and Sanskrit drama, analyzed through the Aristotle's Poetics and Bharata's Natya Shastra were central to early comparative studies. Cultural insight through differences, the comparisons highlighted the both similarities and cultural differences, which contributing a deeper understanding of aesthetics and ethics. Emergence of comparative reflection. Comparative study facilitate the ongoing engagement with questions of self, otherness, and cultural relationships. Jadavpur Journal of Comparative Literature, established in 1961, the journal became a significant platform for literary studies in all over the India. Second one is Indian literature, literature as comparative literature. In the 1970s, new pedagogical perspectives brought Indian literature into comparative literature syllabus at Jadavpur University. Indian literature's inclusions was not about asserting national identity, but it also exploring interconnected literary networks. Comparative literature studies at Jadavpur emphasized interdisciplinary approaches, blending literature with other culture forms like painting, sculpture, and architecture. T.S. Satyanath introduced a theory integrating scriptocentric, body-centric, and phonocentric analysis of medieval texts. The discipline began questioning universalist canons and prioritizing Indian literatures and Southern global literatures. Older definitions of Indian literature focused on Sanskrit and canonical texts were replaced with more inclusive approaches to multilingual and performative traditions. Comparative literature addressed the dialectic of unity and difference within Indian literatures as proposed by Aziz Ahmad. The field explored the interplay between mainstream and marginalized elite and popular textual and performative traditions. Sisir Kumar Das spearheaded the creation of comprehensive, integrative 3 volumes histories of Indian literature. Interaction between Indian literature and those outside geopolitical boundaries were included in the comparative perspectives. Delhi University's Modern Indian Languages Department also integrated comparative Indian literature into the curriculum in 1974. A national seminar on comparative literature at Delhi University in 1977 marked as a milestone in the field. The MA course in comparative Indian literature at Delhi University began in 1994. Comparative literature pedagogy in Delhi benefited from the diverse student body, which include significant representation from India's northeast. Research on Indian literature fostered pluralist epistemologies through historical, linguistic, and cultural intersection. Third one is Centers of Comparative Literature Studies. Comparative literature flourished in South India during 1970s and 80s with centers at Trivandrum, Madurai, Kottayam, Pondicherry, and Dasan University. Madurai Kamraj University established a full-fledged comparative literature studies department within the School of Tamil Studies. Kerala's poet, author, and critic K. Ayyappa Panikkar contributed significantly to comparative literature, especially in narrative tradition and literary theory. Classical Tamil texts were compared with Greek, Latin, and Japanese texts to explore cross-cultural literary traditions. In the 1980s and 1990s, comparative literature centers emerged in universities like Punjab University, Dibrugarh University, and Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Marathwada University. Fourth one is configuration of areas of comparison. In 1980s, Jadavpur University expanded its syllabus to include 100 years of solitude and a text from African and Latin American literatures focusing on resistance in colonial epistemology gaps. In the 1990s, area studies of African, Latin American, Canadian, and Bangladeshi or Chinese and Japanese literatures were introduced as Jadavpur University. Research on Chinese and Japanese studies in relation to Indian literature is being pursued at Jadavpur University. The area's studies centers of African, Latin American, and Canadian literatures host research annual seminars and also at Jadavpur University. Reception studies emerged as a focus emphasizing how elements of foreign literature were adapted to local cultural needs. Romanticism in Bengal reflected local values, which favoring serenity and inner strength while critiquing certain European elements like Byron's sentimentality. Romanticism's reception in Bengal evolved, with Shelley gaining prominence during India's independence movement from revolutionary ideals. Sisir Kumar Das highlighted varied reception of Shakespeare in India's from Parsi theatre to political reinterpretations. Cross-culture reception studies analyzed culture exchanges such as the influence of Sanskrit and German Romanticism and its subsequent return to India. Under Amiya Dev's guidance, Jadavpur University's master syllabus emphasized the genres, themes, and literary historiography, which shaping the comparative literature departments nationwide. Reception studies examined both vertical, ancient to modern text, and horizontal, inter and intra-literary relations influence, including the Buddhist, Jaina, and Vedic traditions. Courses like cross-cultural literature transaction explore texts like Kipling's Kim and Tagore's Gora to study the interplay of local and translation forces. The introduction of the semester system at Jadavpur University merged Indian and Western literature courses for integrated understanding. Literary transaction courses addressed the themes like reason and rationalism in European and Indian literature of the 18th and 19th century. My learning outcome is Subha Chakraborty Dasgupta's articles provides an in-depth historical trajectory of comparative literature in India with a focus on its decolonizing efforts and interdisciplinary evolution. And the article highlights how the discipline emerged through pioneering institutions like Jadavpur University, which influenced by Tagore's idea of world literature and evolved from Eurocentric frameworks to embrace Indian and marginalized literatures. It emphasized the shift from influence studies to cross-cultural reception, advocating for non-hierarchical, creative, and intercultural literary engagement. For the further presentation, I would like to call HEMALI.
Thank you, Hardi and Divya, for the information. Fifth one is research direction. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, comparative literature research expanded across India. Thanks to the University Grants Commission's Special Assistance Program, this program funded various university departments to study literature from a comparative perspective. Departments like those at Calcutta University, Saurashtra University, and Dibrugarh University explored literary relations between India and Europe, translated Indian authors, and documented folk traditions. These initiatives helped create an archive of Indian literature, encouraging research on East-West literary relations, translation studies, and Third World literature. The research also focused on redefining the literary periods like Romanticism in the Indian context. The program led to successful translation workshops focusing on Indian languages without the use of English. These efforts gradually built a comprehensive collection of materials about Indian literature and its interactions with global cultures. An interdisciplinary approach emerged, emphasizing literature as a knowledge system, which became a major focus of later research. The study of oral traditions became a key area, with collaborations between researchers and grassroots artists. These oral texts were seen as valuable knowledge systems that could provide alternatives to modern urban life. Dalit literature was also explored, examining how it supports mainstream narratives and raises awareness about human suffering through performative elements. Research on the literary connections between India and its neighboring countries uncovered long long-standing cultural exchanges. This led to an international conference on South-to-South dialogue, which explored themes like travelogues, the portrayal of Burma in literature, and the connection between Perso-Arabic and South Asian literatures. This expanded the scope of comparative literature research beyond regional boundaries. Sixth one is interface with translation studies and cultural studies. Comparative literature today engages deeply with translation studies, which helps understand literary relations through translation. Translation is also seen as a form of rewriting, enabling engagement with other cultures. Cultural studies examines the relationship between literature and other forms of art, including the study of subcultures, gender, and identity politics. Courses in comparative literature also focus on urban rural representations and the social functions of performance. These studies look at rituals, theaters, and everyday life, offering insights into social behavior and cultural practices. Interdisciplinary approaches are common, with literature remaining the core of the field. Seventh one is non-hierarchical connectivity. Comparative literature today aims for non-hierarchical connectivity between cultures and regions. Concept of co-construction by Kumkum Sangari. She focuses on subtle histories of translation, circulation, and extraction. Comparative literature seeks to construct literary histories without dividing regions or traditions, promotes civilizational gestures against divisive forces, fostering human creativity. Continuous effort in expanding the boundaries of knowledge through literature. In conclusion, comparative literature in India has evolved by integrating global literary theories with the country's rich linguistic and cultural diversity. The discipline emphasizes interdisciplinary approaches such as translation studies and cultural studies to promote a more inclusive and decolonized understanding of literature. It highlights the importance of exploring cross-cultural relations, marginalized voice, and non-hierarchical connections in future research. Here is my learning outcome. It helps me to understand the historical emergence of comparative literature in India, especially its roots at Jadavpur University. Recognize the role of India's linguistic and cultural diversity in shaping the discipline, and helps me to learn how interdisciplinary approaches like translation studies and cultural studies enrich literary analysis. Explore the importance of decolonizing the discipline through indigenous theories and inclusive frameworks. Analyze evolving research directions such as cross-cultural connections and the study of marginalized voices. Here are references. Thank you.
So my question is to Divya, that how did the shift from influence studies to reception studies impact comparative literature research in India?
Okay, the shift from influence studies to reception study, especially impact on comparative literature, according to Subha Chakraborty, is that the research on the local literature through the global implication, especially in the needs of local literature through the include or expandation on the origin literature in the expandation of literature is reflect that the influence of the literature on the reception studies and especially on comparative literature. Thank you.
Divya, my question is, how did the comparative literature syllabus at JADAV University evolve over time?
Okay, the comparative literature syllabus at especially in JADAV University, the expand or the especially inclusion of the worldwide literature according to Rabindranath Tagore, which reflect that the African literature, Latin or Asian, this kind of literature which reflect or studies at the syllabus of JADAV University, which reflect the idea of the old time or contemporary time. Thank you.
Hello everyone, myself JATINBHAI. Today, me and my fellow presenter like HIRAL, VAITHA and SOLANKI spread to some light on what is comparative literature today by Susan Bassnett. Table of content. I will deal with abstract key points and key arguments of this article. Susan Bassnett article explain what is comparative literature is and how it has changed over time. It's look at how this field compare works from different culture and language going to beyond the study just one country's literature. The article also talk about the role of translation, points out problems with focusing too much on Europe and highlights other importance of including diverse perspective. It suggests that comparative literature should be open to new ideas and connect with other fields as the world become more globalized. The research problem of this article is the traditional literature studies mainly focus on European works and ignore the other culture. Objective of this article, the goal is to make comparative literature more inclusive by including works from different culture and languages along with translation studies. The methodology of this article, the author Susan Bassnett looks at the history and example in the field showing how translation and new ideas can be make comparative literature more open. Key finding, comparative literature should include global perspective, diversity, voice and work with other fields to stay relevant. Key points of this article, comparative study explores the text from various cultures focusing on how they are connected across time and space. Basically, comparative study is an interdisciplinary field, is not stuck on any one nation's literature. It's also involved the other nation literature and also a historical background and cultural element also. While globalization has made global literature more accessible, it has contributed to cultural homogenization. Comparative literature help counteract this by fostering deeper appreciation from diverse culture and perspective. Key argument of this article, interdisciplinary connection. The comparative literature is not just about the comparing books, but also exploring the connection between them. It's look at how stories, ideas, and themes link together across different culture and times, beyond nation and world literature. As we discussed, the comparative literature is not stuck on any particular nation literature. It's also considered as an interdisciplinary terms. Focus on text. The main goals is to carefully read and analyze the text themselves. While culture and historical backgrounds are considered, the focus remains on understanding the world's themes and style of the books. Accessible to all. Comparative literature is not just for expert of academic. Anyone who enjoy reading books from different culture and exploring their meaning is already part of it. A constant evolving field. A comparative literature keeps growing and changing as new ideas, technology, and global trends emerge. It includes a new approach like a feminist post-colonial study and use digital tools to stay relevant and existing. My learning outcome from this article, understanding what comparative literature is. From this article, I got idea about what is comparative literature and how it complex. Learning how to compare a story. Comparative literature is not just about the compare to text or to words. It's also connected with historical background, cultural element, and society and politics also. appreciating other culture. The article totally declined the idea of Eurocentric literature in Eurocentric idea in literature, and it's also appreciating the other cultures and other countries' literature also. Thinking critically about the story, the article opens a new way for us to think about the works and texts. Okay, so this is end from my side. From here, Hiral will take the charge. I will like to invite Hiral VAITHA.
So, hello everyone. I will deal with the core content of the article. So, as we know that how comparative literature will work. So, basically the comparative literature is, according to Bassnett, that is the study of text from the different cultures and different views. So, it is a interdisciplinary focus and understanding on the connections between the literatures and across the time and space traveling. So most of the people don't start with the comparative literature, but they find their way to express their feeling and what they are thinking about the literature or the world. So basically, one subject feels that too narrow, and others might be driven explore the similarities. So it's among the between text and author from the different cultures and background. Some are the inspired that, according to Matthew Arnold's view, that in what he expressed in the 1857 inaugural lecture at Oxford University, that everywhere there is a connection, everywhere there is a illustration. No single event, no single literature are adequately inherent except in relation to other events, to other literatures also. So, by continuing the article's observation, that is the Goethe introduced the terms of world literature in the describe that comparative literature is because of the breakdowns, borders, bringing all the literature closer together, all the merge all the ideas, and it's like that we are talking with each other. That comparative study work in that manner. So also this comparative literature promoting the harmony of the literature. And in the late 20th century, critics were still debating on the same questions about the comparative literature. And it's like that some of the question included like what should be the focus on the study of comparative literature, how can comparative comparison itself to be studied, and how does the comparison choose what to compare. So, is comparative literature is formal, disciplinary, or just field of study? They will question have persisted since 1950s. And when VAGH referred to the crisis of comparative literature, it's early as 1903 that Bennett argued that comparative literature was not the separate subject, but he suggested that its art and its literary history, and specifically comparative literature and the history should not be proper and focus on the study or on the topic, but it's according to him that literature must be understood within the historical context or more than that. And he was also focusing that it's connecting to be the larger literacy history, that he dismissed that term of comparative literature in the one place, and saying it that it's obscured that the fact of literary history towards the true object of the study on the particular topic. So, in the contrast, some scholars like Charles Mills, they promoted that the idea of comparative literature explored the literature as the universal through of the conversation, like shaped by various social, cultural, and historical factors, as we all know, and it's echoed this view in the 1974 that comparative literature represents a broader view towards the literature and offering the comprehensive the understanding of the global cultural global thoughts towards among each other, and it's all merged into the kind of like a literary work. And while the Western scholars debated on the role of the comparative literature, they found that in the field was gaining a transition in the other parts of the world, that that in the new comparative literature programs, they appeared in the countries like China, Japan, Taiwan. However, all the regions comparative literature was often focused on the specific literary work or the tradition or the culture. That unlike Western focus on the universalism, and as a Swapna Majumdar notes that the focus on the national literature has to lead towards the strong presence of comparative literature in the countries like India also. So we can say that the comparative literature is not the one kind of, we can say that the the thing that which we can put it in the one country or one space. So post-colonial theorists like Homi Bhabha have also pointed that instead of simply cross the referencing text, that we let's focus on the should be on the complexity of the work and the literature. So in the productive mixing the cultural ideas, Wolsoenka and other African critics have to be critic the European philosophers like Hegel, and who wrongly portrayed the African culture inferior. And also James argued that European culture is still reconciling with the black culture, and it's showing that the cultural separation was more historical construct than the natural difference in the skin tone or in the thought process also. So as per my observation that beyond the Eurocentrism, this article focus more on like in the literary view, and this article shift on the focus that if we can say that in the literary text we think that we are talking about this space or this region or this country. But later on, we by studying this article, we found that the comparative literature is not the part of any particular region, any particular culture, or any particular country also. So this article that questioning the boundaries, that how it not the part of the only particular thing or any particular thought or any particular person. And also this article encouraged the cross cultures, that we should believe in cross cultures, that we should believe in the like in the multiple thoughts, and we should appreciate others' thoughts also in the literature, and we should accept our mistakes, that if we have mistaken in something that which another person will pointing that this is your mistake and I'm arguing on this and that to you, so we should appreciate him that no, it's my mistake and you pointed my mistake and I will take care of about it. So that's it, my side. I will call Jai for further discussion.
Thank you, Jatin and Hiral, for providing an introduction and core content of the article. So now I will going to list some of the writer who also argue and pointed out and also suggest some of the things that how comparative literature and how it's shaped in the culture as well. So first is Terry Eagleton, that he also argue about that literature, as we understand it, it is a form of ideology. He explained that the rise of English literature as academic subject in the 19th century was connected to the political changes after World War I. So literature served both as a source of comfort for the English people and a way of exploring their identity. So we can find out about the European people, as I mentioned in the article, how their subject was defined in the about the identity, their identity. Other one is Ganesh Devi, that he pointed out that comparative literature in India emerged alongside the rise of Indian nationalism. So it's also highlight the fact that the term comparative literature came about during a time of national struggle in the Europe. So we can find out in Europe how the struggle is going on, and in between the comparative literature take a big part in that. where the idea of national identity and the culture was heavily debated. So this both things are debated about in Europe. Other one is David Temple that in his book What is World Literature, he discussed the role of comparative literature and emphasized the importance of translation in connecting the different cultures. So we can find out how different cultures in every country are given in the book. Also, he also mentioned about that. Even Zohar suggests that translation is especially important when a culture is going through a period of change or expansion. In contrast, when the culture feels secure and dominant, translation becomes the less of the priority. We can find out if in the culture when the people are more secure about that, but the translation is not there giving the priority. The last one is the Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak. So she noted that comparative literature and the area studies can work together to promote not only the national literatures of the global south, but also the enriched language that are disappeared around the world. We can find out that some of the language are not there. Like if we find out that mostly the country are speaking English, but that's not like if we find out the French is not like too much speaking English, or they are not speaking that way. So Spivak also believes that comparative literature should always cross borders, and as its relevance depends on the changing time and global context. We can find out the change of the literature, comparative literature, how it's involved in the people and how it's in time to time they are changing as well. So conclusion, we can find out how comparative literature, how work, and how Susan Bassnett also giving or arguing or pointed out some of the things as well. Comparative literature is a broad, evolving field, not a single discipline. It has been shaped by many different theories and approaches. It also historically goes back to the early 19th century and in the 20th century. Is focused more literary texts from the different cultures. As I said, there are many countries and there are different cultures are provided, and how they're seen as the literature, how they're seen comparative literature, how they argue and pointed out some of the things as well. It also began to include ideas from the fields like anthropology, sociology, and linguistics. Recently, post-structuralist and post-colonial theories have influenced the field and leading to the greatest focus how literary shape cultural identity and the power. So the thing is how cultural identity are providing the different countries, how literature shape in their time. In today's time, comparative literature is more diverse and open, offering a new way to understand the world. So we can find out today's time how literature shapes us, that how we see the literature is not like some of the way, like if we are telling some of the truth or some of the fact, that only way we can, but we are also criticizing or we are arguing in that also. So this is one. Now I'm going to tell how my learning outcome and how what I am understanding from this article. So as I analyze the article, I come to know the literature is very important in the cultural power, and how he shaped the people, country, and other writers who are writing on the literature. I also understand the translation impact on the global literary exchanges. Also, I understand the Magellan voice in the global literature, that how they appreciate in this kind of the global literature, how they're in the today's time. Also, we find out that a lot of writers, a lot of authors are in a way not. Some of the writers are also mentioning about the literature, how they understanding about that, how they're suggesting their point of view as well, applying the post-colonial perspective to comparative study. As I understand about this thing, that post-colonial, we can find out that mostly we not in a way we're talking about the post-colonial things, but when we come to know about the comparative literature, then we also connect with the post-colonial, explore the interdisciplinary approach to literature. So some of the literature are very vast to understand and very well to describe as the writer, as an author, or as any particular person who are not very thoughtful for the comparative literature. Recognize the evolution of nature and comparative literature. As I come to know, as I not very interested in the comparative literature, but when I starting to think about or giving my personal view, then I come to know that comparative literature also made a very huge role in the all the countries or on the culture as well. So yeah, this is references, and thank you so much. This is from our side.
My question to Jatin that how can comparative literature stay relevant in globalized world?
Comparative literature still stay relevant in globalized world because comparative literature hits the areas of global literature and global culture, and adopt all the element of different countries and their culture also. And comparative literature is also adapt the global changing and political elements and involved in itself. So that's why we can say the comparative literature is still relevant in modern time also. Thank you.
My question is to Hiral. What role does translation play in shaping the future of comparative literature?
So the comparative literature is basically, we know that the comparative literature help us to connect with the people globally and the universally. So based on that, we focus that in the today's time and in the future also we can focus more on that connection, and by time passed away, we feel that the arguments and previous time era and all the observation was relevant, and we found that all the things and all the works and the connection is still relevant, and still the connection is becoming more powerful towards the nation, to the nation, people to the people. And we can say that if one person or one author will trying to convince on their perspective or on their views, so we still connect with him or her, which we read and which he or she written in the many years ago. So that is the connection between the comparative studies and the translation play the role in the shaping the future. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Today, me and my co-presenter Kavita Chauhan deal with Todd Presner article "Comparative Literature in the Age of the Digital Humanities on Possible Future for Discipline." This is academic information. This is table of content. Abstract. Todd Presner's article explores how digital technologies are transforming comparative literature. It highlights the shift from the print to digital media, the rise of collaborative scholarship, and the use of tools like distant reading.
The article emphasized the need for new method to adapt to digital culture and redefines the role of the humanities in the modern era. This article research problem is how can comparative literature evolve in the digital age to address transformation in technology, culture, and knowledge production. This article objectives to explore the impact of digital humanities on comparative literature. Propose to methodologies for integrating digital platform in literary studies to analyze the challenges of adapting the traditional discipline to digital frameworks. This article methodology analytical review for technological shift using case study like Wikipedia, Hypercities, and Google Books. Comparative analysis of traditional and digital humanities practice. This article key finding digital humanities enables collaborative, global, and multimodal knowledge creation. New tools like computational analysis redefines the scope of literature and authorship. This article key points Todd Presner given by the evolution of comparative literature parallel major historical shift. For example, the printing press and new world discovery. Digital humanities broadens literary studies to include digital artifact and global knowledge platforms. Collaborative models challenge to traditional notion of authorship and scholarship. Technologies like text mining, distant reading, hypermedia offer new analytical method. Digital platform expose and amplify global inequalities alongside their democratizing potential. Todd Presner given in this article key argument the translation from print culture to digital media necessity new methodology and comparative literature. Digital humanities prompts participatory scholarship leveraging open access platform and collaborative tools. The field must critically analyze power dynamics inherent in digital technology. Comparative literature serves a problem rather than fixed canon, addressing emergent culture and technological challenge. Digital humanities emphasize the interplay of media-specific effortness from multi-modality to interactivity. This is my learning for I read this article. Digital humanities reshape my understanding of literature and authorship. He is also collaborative and multimodal approaches expand the scope of traditional and discipline. This research deepened my appreciation for interdisciplinary practice and their role in cultural studies. Understanding power dynamics and digital media is critical for ethical knowledge production. Practical application in my academic practice include engaging with the participatory platform like digital archive. So this is from my side. Now I would like to call Kavita deal with her next content.
So thank you for before information, and now I will deal with the article core content. The article of core content. First of the transformation from print to digital media. The transition from the print to digital media is a transformative shift to comparative literature like Todd Presner to print, press, and new world discover. print enable profound culture change such as reformation and enlightenment, while digital technology now reshape and knowledge creation. Advanced rating from seafaring to social networking have compress time and space, creating unpredicted global connectivity. However, technology dual nature to appear. The Nicholas Negroponte emphasized its potential for democratization alongside the risk of control and violence, while Paul Gilroy highlight the descriptive legacy of historical progress. In the context of the critique and Catherine Hells argue that the text, while the print or digital, are embodies entire the whole medium shape their meaning. This rapid change to require comparative literature to rethink methodologic authorship and materials. Second is participatory knowledge of creation and collaboration. In this context, the comparative participatory nature of digital humanity redefine the traditional scholarship by the prioritization, collaboration, and global contribution. Platform like Wikipedia, with over the 300 million edits and article in 47th languages exemplify how collective knowledge creation challenges academic hierarchies. Similarly, hypersite integrate digital mapping with historical narrative, offering interactive exploration. Todd Presner raised the critical question about who create and control knowledge in the digital age, and how corporate intersect influence cultural legacies. While this platform democrate access to information, challenges persist in the ensuring scholarly rigor and addressing global inequality. And third is analytic methodology in the digital humanity. In this area, Todd Presner talk about the methodologies and digital humanity, how to convey it, and the various writers. Digital humanity include the new methodology that expand and complete traditional literary analysis. Fanon Moritz distant reading focus on the micro level pattern across text, while Lev Manovich's cultural analysis use data visualization to explore cultural data sets. In comparative data studies, Jaron Megan described the Electric Oxford English Dictionary as the meta book that enhanced the traditional resource with advanced indexing and annexation. This approach broadened the literary canon into include more digital text like tweet and blogs. Similarly, comparative media study examine the interactive and authorship in the multi-modern environments, questioning and the very definition of authorship and textualities. In platform of studies, collaborative feedback system like Wikipedia highlight the importance of the openness in scholarship. This advancement necessity balancing the computational tool with the humanistic methodologies to manage the overwhelming volume of digital content while the perceiving core value of the humanities. It's my learning outcome of the key. Comparative literature have involved to include the digital born artifact and fostering interdisciplinary collaboration between the scholar and technology. In the article, I found some scholar and these applied the technology with digital humanity and their methodologies. Platform like the Wikipedia exemplify the participatory knowledge creation and challenging traditional authorship. In the area like traditional, some books and article is like written form, and the digital humanity expand in the form like a PDF and Wikipedia format, and that time is authorship is important, and technology dual role to democratization access and enable acquisition highlight the need for a critical examination method like distance reading and inclusion for of tweet, blog, and multimedia expand literary analysis. Some days my personal experience is like blog and other activities like during our MA, and we are use that for our learning outcome, and while the media based approach as emphasized the also critique Catherine has underscored the importance of understanding stakes and digital context. And last but not least, a conclusion. The article concludes with a call for scholars of engaging deep with the digital humanities. Presner argued that comparative literature must adapt to remain the relevant, embracing the interdisciplinary collaboration, the computational tool, and the participatory tool of scholarship. It's references, and thank you. If you have any question, feel free to ask me.
So Kavita, my question is for you that how do digital effects in films, like example for Avatar, transform the concept of the materiality in the visual storytelling?
In the film Avatar, film Avatar transforms the concept of materiality and visual storytelling. Is the film Avatar is and first of the digital effect in the film is like a traditional way, is like a return setup, costume and prompt in the all thing in is like a prompt, and the film Avatar is changed to other like its use digital effect is like visual character and some CGI computer generated images during the film is not a real world, but impact that is a real world. It impossible in the real life to make this world is like Avatar movie, but in the movie it possible to use of digital humanities and that tools to how the film to make the various characters is like in the film Avatar, the world of the Paradora in the characters, landscape and everything to visualize, and it's to like not personal experience, but it's useful to how to fulfill our wishes and not real life, but visually it see in the movie.
Kavita, can digital platforms like YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram be considered new forms of literature?
Yes. The digital platform like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram to be considered the new form of literature, because in the modern era of the digital humanities, in comparison of the old era, because YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, three of these platform is like open for all of you know anyone to use, and that's is like you make like a blogger and create or a account, and you make a you your reach to high position, and make us audience through the your story to highlight the whole thing, and without any cost, and useful to all areas, and its comparison like some short stories and video blogger and all thing to is like video creation, and make your Facebook, YouTube accounts and publish that things, and its comparison like the all thing like poetry and diary written thing, but no you no everyone read your diary and poetry your in the book, but it's put on the Facebook, your Instagram and Facebook that account, and anyone to easily reach your account and read and get knowledge. And this is from our side, and thank you.
Okay, so before we switch over to the another group of presentations on translation studies, just the summary of the things. So we have seen in between also that first presentation, second presentation, they did quite well and presented good ideas, and learning outcome also was presented very well. Third also relatively did quite well and also presented. You just have to see that those who are not able to connect this, how to write learning outcome. You can use this template of sentence that before getting exposed to this article or this literary text, I was thinking in this manner, I was doing it in this manner, I did something like this, or I thought something like this. Now there is a change in the way I think or the way I do the things there. That simple template you can use. So back then or before, what you were doing, and now after this, what you are doing, that will help you to write in a very simple but in a better manner about your key takeaways or your learning outcome. Last two are we have given you an additional task for your group activities in Google Classroom and in group email also, where you are supposed to write a summary of the article. You can also give a link of this presentation which you will upload on SlideShare, and from that you will give the link in the summary. But you will write a descriptive summary also, not a very long summary, but the gist of the article should be covered in the summary, which should be followed by long questions and short questions. So how many long questions? Like we told that 4. So 3 to 4 long questions and around 7 to 8 short notes. You have to prepare from this. You don't have to prepare answers, but you have to prepare the questions. And where the answers can be found, that key should be given in the article or in your summary. Where that answer can be found, that key, answer key, you have to give, so that the other members of your classmate can easily read and understand that how to frame the answer for the given question. And the third one is to prepare MCQs, like 4 MCQs and 1 true or false question. You have to prepare, and for this you have next 2 days only, and within next 2 days you have to complete this work, so it can be helpful to everybody. If we will get good questions, we will add that in question bank also. The long question, short notes, if it will be very well drafted by everybody, then that all questions will be included in the question bank also, so it can help you later on when you prepare for your university exams also. In the last article, there was one important point that was missed out. So as an example, I tell this. So anything very crucial or important is missed out from summary, then you have to be very careful about. Like in the article on digital humanities, there was a key concern that the humanist had remained silent over something that was happening. For example, Google Books and Disney had a legal case, and they won the legal case to have ownership of orphan books and material. which can be seen as a problem in future, that if a company is owning orphaned knowledge systems, maybe they may try to control the way the future generations will look at the world. Knowledges, wisdom, everything can be affected in that manner. So digital humanities people should be very aware about what is happening in the digital spaces and how knowledge systems are being affected. If they are democratized, like Wikipedia is trying to do, then it should be celebrated. If it is monopolized in any manner, then it should be challenged, or a critic should be presented on that. So that was one good point which was missed in the presentation. So I hope that you will keep in mind when you prepare the things. We are ending this live stream and we are starting a new live stream for the presentations of translation studies.